Hi, today we're going to be going through Dante's Inferno, the first book of his Divine Comedy. And the question we've been starting with is, why do we actually read these books? Why do we spend time with them? This is another one of the books that Harold Bloom has ranked very highly, which again shows us that it has been acclaimed not just in the Christian and Catholic worlds, but also amongst humanists. But the question is obviously, why does Harold Bloom place such a high priority on Dante's Inferno and the Divine Comedy in general? What truth, goodness, and beauty does he see in it? And so the beauty, I think, of Dante's Inferno is in his rhyme scheme. He invented terza rima, which is an ABA, BCB, CDC rhyme scheme, where the first and the third lines of each stanza rhyme. And in the Italian, this works incredibly well. It's quite beautiful, and it flows well also. Dante's Inferno also provides insight into the medieval world that he lived in, both the political and ecclesiastical worlds that he was engaged so heavily in. It also provides us insight into art that was generated in response to Dante's Divine Comedy. And the most famous of these is Rodin's Gates of Hell. The French sculptor created this from a number of different scenes from Dante's, specifically Dante's Inferno. The Inferno and the Divine Comedy also deal with some hard truths, and people are often put off by these due to the visceral nature, but as Dante is dealing with death and punishment, we really shouldn't expect anything less from him. And so as a side point on that, it's probably best to limit Dante's Inferno and Purgatorio to your 9th graders and above. Certainly there are going to be students who are more mature and able to read it earlier, and certainly probably some students who will need to wait a little bit longer as well. But 9th grade is probably a good baseline for that. And ultimately for us as Christians, Dante says it himself in some external contemporaneous works, that the Divine Comedy was intended to lead all who read it into a deeper understanding of Christ and their faith in Him. And so it has been doing so for centuries to this point. And so now it's our turn to engage with it in that way and let our own faith and love for Christ be deepened in that. As a brief aside again, if you are unfamiliar with the terminology of comedy, it is not necessarily saying something that is comical or ha-ha funny all the way through, though Dante certainly does have points where he writes in a comical way. It is more speaking in terms of Shakespeare. You might be more familiar with his Merchant of Venice or Much Ado About Nothing, where it starts in a place of despair and moves to a place of joy by the end of it. And that is certainly the way that Dante is using it here. And a note on translation, there are a number of good translations for the Divine Comedy. I am partial to Anthony Esselin's, mostly because of his in-text notes, and his endnotes are so helpful in revealing some of the context and the allusions that Dante makes throughout the work. He also doesn't force the rhyme. In Italian, it's a lot easier to end your sentences with words that rhyme because so many words end in vowels. But when English translators try to do the same thing, you lose a lot of the meaning. And it ends up placing overemphasis on words which are not the most important in the phrase. Esselin also places the Italian and the English side by side. So if you're looking to learn Italian, it's a great way to practice that. But even if not, it's nice to be able to see the original in its true form next to what Esselin has translated. There's also a little bit of historical context which is helpful to know before approaching the Divine Comedy. And this is necessary because Dante is constantly referencing and alluding to the political and religious figures who were important during and before his time. And so Dante was born in 1265 AD in Florence, Italy. He was born to a father who was a low-level political figure for a party called the Guelphs, who were very much pro-Pope, and whose rivals were the Ghibellines, who were very much pro-Roman Emperor. And about a year or so after Dante's birth, the Ghibellines were kicked out of Florence, and so he grew up in a Guelph world. He knew only this party. But eventually the Guelphs split into two different parties, the Black Guelphs and the White Guelphs, and Dante aligned himself with the White Guelphs. They were very critical of the current Pope, Bonaventure VIII, and really were calling for an overhaul of the papacy. Whereas the Black Guelphs, who Dante characterizes quite negatively all throughout the Inferno, were very much okay with the status quo. They didn't see any really big issues with the current pope. And so this is, again, a necessary distinction because Dante is referring to the Black Guelphs as essentially morally bankrupt all throughout the Inferno and even in parts of the Purgatorio. You will also likely see all throughout the Divine Comedy a reference to a woman named Beatrice. And you might be thinking, oh, that's probably Dante's wife. And you